Hey everybody, welcome back to the Senators Roundtable. I'm your host Jacob Billington, joined by Dayton as always, and today we have Matthew, who's usually behind the scenes, but he's going to join us today as Paul's out of the country on vacation. So Matthew does a lot of producing for the podcasts and everything. He's the voice behind the news and rumors shorts and does a lot of Canucks content. So welcome to the podcast, Matthew. Is this your first time on with us?
I believe I've been on another time too. I can't
Okay.
remember when, but I'm pretty sure I was. Yeah.
Cool. Dayton, how you doing?
Oh, doing pretty good as always. Just kind of checking in on the Senators game. They don't have the stream out in Saskatoon, but I can get the NHL updates. So just just trying to hope that the Senators score first. We're recording this during the game.
Yes, we're
Uh,
just about the end of the second period as we speak. So,
yeah.
Ottawa is absolutely dominating the Capitals. The score is 0-0 because Logan Thompson is unreal. But yeah, it's been quite the game for the Senators. Everybody looks really good. Matt and Paolo and Sabrango as the third pair look phenomenal. So yeah, it's hard to complain about what's going on tonight, but not a whole bunch to talk about. No big takeaways yet. So the first thing I think we should talk about, since Matthew, you're here, is any connection between the Ottawa Senators and Vancouver Canucks. So a few weeks ago, I wrote a piece, and I talked about how the Senators could kind of take advantage of the Canucks chaos, and um, I wrote about four names, and I wrote about Elias Pettersson, JT Miller, Nils Hoglander, and Brock Besser. I'm gonna ask you, Dayton, first. Which of those four would you target from the Canucks first?
In a perfect world, Elias Pettersson, he's the best of the four. Um, the price is astronomical, so it's in reality, it's never going to happen. But I think adding him to a first or a second line, like that turns the Senators from, a pretty good team to an incredible team. And the other three, Besser, Miller, and what was the third one?
Nils Hoglander.
Hoglander. I think in reality, Hoglander is the most interesting. He kind of fits along with the path that the Senators are on right now. So he's younger, but he's an established NHL player, right? I don't think you'd put him in the AHL at this point, unless he's there, and then I'm
No,
No,
he's been
he's
in the
playing.
NHL. Yeah.
okay. I don't follow the Canucks, so I'm not sure if he was down or not, because then I'd look at stupid.
Well, and he
But
had he had 24 goals in 80 games last year, and this
yeah,
season so far he has two,
Three.
three.
He
Yeah,
just broke a 30 something game slump, so
I
yeah.
thought he was
So
an established guy. But yeah, that's somebody I think that the Senators could afford and would fit in right with their team. I think, he would be developing along with those guys and become, a bit more tight knit than bringing in somebody like a Pettersson or a Miller, who are already established veterans. That's when you're chasing a cup. The Senators are still chasing a playoff berth, and I think you still want to target guys to bring in. You don't want to be a seller, but you want to bring in younger guys.
yeah, that makes sense. So if you were to acquire, if you were to go from Miller or Pettersson, probably more so Pettersson, would you at all be willing to give up Carter Yakimchuk?
For Pettersson,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think so
I,
too. I mean, I think it's obviously going to cost that, but he's the only real prospect in the system, which makes it really difficult. So, and it would also probably take Yakimchuk and the first round pick this year. So then you're not adding anything either. So I don't know.
yeah. I don't know if Yakimchuk will ever become a Pettersson level star.
No, I don't
Um,
think so.
yeah, like I think he's going to be a top pairing defender,
Yeah.
like second pairing at the very least. Um,
I
and I
could,
think he's going to put up a ton of points, maybe even hit like Mike Green levels.
yeah.
I could see him putting away 70, but I
And
don't
since we're
think he.
talking about the Canucks,
Yeah,
honestly, I think a pretty good comparable would be Hronik. Maybe a bit better, like the Hronik we saw last year, and since coming, like obviously in Detroit, he wasn't the true star that he was last year with Vancouver, but I think that could be a good comparable.
yeah, I could see that. Or like a
Um,
young Tyler Myers.
yeah.
yeah, that's true with a lot more offensive upside, but
Yeah,
um, play style, yeah, I could see that. So Matthew, if Ottawa was going for, I guess we'll exclude Hoglander just because the cost of acquisition wouldn't be very much. So if Ottawa's going after Besser or Miller or Pedersen, what would you like to see come back? What would it cost Ottawa?
Well, I mean, you guys mentioned with Pedersen, I think Yakimchuk would have to be in there, but the way that I see it is if you're trading Pedersen, you have to get a center equivalent to him in return. Because what are you doing by trading Pedersen for futures for top prospects not in the league yet? First round pick, not sure what that's going to turn out to be. That's sending a message saying we're selling, we're creating a new core that we don't know what it is yet. So it's like you're trading a core player. You should be getting a guy that you're like, this is the guy we're replacing him with. I don't see that as, if they do trade Pedersen, it's going to be for another centerman. Who does the Senators give up as a centerman is equivalent to Pedersen. Tim Stutzle, that's not happening. So I'm saying that that's probably a no-go. I mean, I'd like a guy like Pinto maybe in that discussion too. I really like Ridley Gregg, him being, but again, not the equivalent of what Pedersen would be. So, I mean, if they're trading a, first round pick, Yakimchuk as the package, and they do that, that's showing just saying that, we're giving up on this and we're going to transition to a new core of players. So that's what I'd be looking for Pedersen. JT Miller and Besser are a little different. I think with Besser, it would potentially be a rental because he's an unrestricted free agent coming up. I don't think the Senators give up a ton unless there's an extension involved. Although, I mean, we've seen first round picks get thrown away for rentals. Jake Gensel went for a first rounder, didn't re-sign with the Hurricanes. So it's like, I don't know if the Senators are there yet, for rental players just to make the playoffs. So, I mean, I think that's where Besser would be. For Miller, it would be interesting. I don't know again, would the Senators go for a veteran guy like that with the term that's amount left on his contract? His money's pretty good though, with 8 million, 8.5 for what he's doing. If he turns back to the Miller of last season, that is. I don't think the Senators want the guy that's playing right now. So I mean, again, I think a first round pick is involved, top prospect. But there's another question. I still think the Canucks should get a centerman for Miller back in return too. So I'm not really sure there's a fit for either the centerman there, but I think Besser could potentially be something.
Yeah, if I'm Steve Staios, obviously, like we mentioned with Hoglander, he's the easiest one to acquire. That's trades with players like Hoglander happen every day. Um, so I'm not going to really include that. But of those big three guys, I think Miller is the one I would be targeting, and I would do a combination of picks and prospects. I would be willing to throw Shane Pinto in there, or even Josh Norris. To be honest, the money makes sense sending Josh Norris over, and he's been having a pretty decent season. Um, so yeah, I could see that making sense. And I mean, JT Miller's play screams Ottawa Senators. Like you look at players that Ottawa has, and Brady Tkachuk and Ridley Gregg and David Perron, who hasn't really played this year, but still that style. Drake Batherson, like they're all just these really physical power forwards. And JT Miller kind of fits in there too. So that's just my thought on it.
If
But
he
how many
plays
power
like,
forwards do you need?
yeah,
I mean, it that many power forwards won the Florida Panthers the Stanley Cup last year.
That's true.
Sam Bennett, Matthew Tkachuk,
mm,
Nick Cozens was on that team. Um, Sam Reinhart. I mean, he's everything. He is a pure goal scorer. He's a great playmaker. He's a great two-way guy. I would consider him a power forward as well. Like that's how the Panthers won the cup last year.
that's if you get the Miller from last season.
Yes, for sure.
The Miller is playing right now. I mean he seems checked out to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean on a new team he may revert back to that or transform back into the power forward guy that he was all last season where he had over 100 points. He just seems like a shell of that type of player right now. So
My
Yeah.
one concern with Miller is that he seems to have a time limit. Like every team he's with, he kind of runs out of favor with because he is so passionate, right? And we're seeing that kind of play out in Vancouver with Pettersson, and Pettersson's not doing well. They're feuding, and it's a mess. Like someone's going to have to move, and it's probably not going to be for what they're worth.
Mhm.
And so that's probably going to be Miller. Do the Senators want to bring in somebody who has like a 3-year cap on him, no matter his contract? Like he's probably going to start messing things up in 3 years. Do you want him butting heads with Tkachuk? Because he almost certainly will. Tkachuk's a strong-willed guy. He'd probably going to butt heads with Stutzle, and that's not going to go well because Stutzle, I think, would be a guy who would more so just kind of shut up and take it. Not to say that he's a passive person or anything, but the way that he kind of sort of shuts down when things get tough. Not shuts down, that's the wrong term, but he's going through a bit of a slump right now.
Would be the same personality as Pettersson.
I would
Yeah.
Similar.
put them a similar personality, yeah.
I would say the Pedersen, like just based on what media says, obviously I don't know either of the
Yeah.
people. But I would say Pedersen is a bit more of like the, and I don't like calling players soft or sensitive, but a bit closer to a soft and sensitive person. I would say Tim Stützle is a bit of a step above, but
I
not
agree.
like not too far ahead. I don't know. And you see that with like these smaller skill guys. And yeah, it seems like it's the smaller skill guys that are usually the kind of more sensitive ones.
Yeah, I think he has an incredible work ethic.
Yeah.
Like more so than a lot of the young stars. Stützle is a really, really strong player. He just doesn't seem like a voice kind of player, you know?
Hmm.
He's not somebody that would, give you a really good sound bite. Whereas Tkachuk is definitely that,
Yeah.
right? He will tell you exactly how it is. Stützle will kind of go around it a little bit. And so, in my opinion, that's somebody who, when confronted with somebody very strong-willed like a Miller,
Yeah.
especially without having that relationship that he does with Brady,
Mm.
I think it would be hard for him to deal with. And in my mind, bringing in somebody like that who is going to cause that problem, it might not be this year or next year, but it's going to happen. Like that's for me like a complete no-go.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so we'll move on from that. I was gonna say we should talk about Meriläinen. He's been unreal for the past week, 2 weeks. We've talked a lot about goaltenders lately. Matthew or Dayton, do either of you have any quick thoughts on what you've been seeing from Meriläinen? Just while he's absolutely taken over and maybe saved the Ottawa Senators playoff hopes.
Yeah, a little bit, eh? I've always, maybe not always, but I've seen him kind of just become a winner, right? He
Yeah.
would do really well in Finland, and then he did really well in the AHL, and now he's doing really well in the NHL. And there was always a little bit of a growth period. In Finland, he wasn't amazing when he was first drafted. He was like fine, and then the season after, incredible.
Mhm.
In the AHL, he had a really strong first couple of games and then sort of petered down. It's like, okay, no, he's still behind Sogard. And then he took over.
Yeah.
And now he's in the NHL. He had a little bit of a growth period, strong first couple of games. And now we're seeing him really take over. I think this is just how he does. I don't know how they found him in the third round. Like that's
Well, I don't know if you remember the 2020 draft, but he wasn't ranked.
at all.
He
No.
was
Yeah.
not a ranked prospect. He
Yeah.
was a nobody.
Yeah, it was weird to see a complete random name taken in the third round. I'm like, what are the Senators doing? This is not how you do this.
Yeah.
2020
And I think
draft was very weird though.
Yeah.
it was very strange. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So I mean, it maybe not a surprise when guys were going. I remember that draft. That's the one I ran on the website. So it's
Yeah.
like the only draft I run is the COVID one, which is like
Yeah,
it
it
was very
was
fun.
yeah.
Um,
So
yeah, Merrill,
Matt, yeah.
I'll give a couple. I mean, Merilainen's been, I mean, this is a guy that, like you guys both said, he's kind of come out of nowhere, maybe. Like I thought Sogard was the next one up. I mean, but Merilainen has really shown that maybe he is. the next one to be at least backing up Allmark because you're hoping that Allmark is going to be your starter for a while here. I that they could provide a really good tandem, maybe like the Allmark Swayman type tandem in the future. But he very early, but he is showing that he could be a bit of a solid prospect for the Senators. I don't think he was on a radar of being a top prospect, and now he seems to be an NHL goalie, so that's really good.
Yeah, and I mean he's got 7 games this year, a 925 save percentage, 5-2-0 record, and one of those losses was he came in after the first period after Allmark left, and it was against the Oilers, so most people lose that game. And he's got 2 shutouts, so and I mean I'm not going to say anything, but right now it's 0-0 at the end of the second against the Washington Capitals. Just throwing that in there with no relevance to this conversation, but Meriläinen's looking fantastic. So yeah, huge fan of what he's been doing. Okay, next on the list, John Klingberg is linked to the Ottawa Senators. Didn't think he was ever going to play a hockey game again.
Oh.
Sounded like that trip to Sweden kind of ruined his hip. And because like I don't know, weird things happen in the air, with the air pressure, and when you have an injury, I don't know, weird things happen. But sounds like he's making his NHL return, and the Ottawa Senators are one of the teams that are linked to him, and it sounds like they're one of the kind of top three contenders for him, along with the Edmonton Oilers, and Toronto is kind of debunked. Doesn't sound like he wants to return there, so he's one of the Ottawa's one of the top contenders for him. So Matthew, do you think that it makes sense for Ottawa to bring Klingberg in?
I mean, if he's back to the type of defenseman that he was, I'm not saying he probably won't be back to the guy that was in Dallas, but
Yeah.
I, he's still a very skilled offensive defenseman. I still think he's more that side. He's not the best defensively. I mean, he's going to be good on the power play for sure. But is the biggest thing is he over this injury? Because is he going to play a month and then be out the season, which is, I mean, still a possibility. Obviously, he's probably coming back knowing that he seems to be ready, and he's not going to get hurt again. But as we've seen with a lot of these types of injuries, you don't know until you start playing games. I mean, you can practice all you want. You can do these, scrimmages or whatever. And then you get into a game where you're getting hit around, you're having to go hard on pucks or back checking or anything like that. All of a sudden, these things come up again. So if he's healthy, I think he is definitely a guy that you want to bring in because he still has that offensive ability, that IQ to jump in the play, be good on the power play and special teams. So I think it's not going to be for very much money, probably 1 year, maybe $1 million. I mean, it's probably not going to be too much. I would say, it's not a big risk if he comes in. You're not paying a ton. And so yeah, I would say it's an okay acquisition.
Yeah, Dayton, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm maybe a little bit more nervous because he is like a very pure offensive defenseman. There are those defensive lapses, and we've seen that in the past with him. That might not fit well with the Senators defense that kind of already has defensive lapses. You need to pair him with somebody who's very strong defensively. Who would that be? Well, Nick Jensen is already kind of working with he's good with Chabot and he's injured right now. Artem Zub, I think he plays mostly with Sanderson, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So those guys are already kind of paired up. Who's the other defensive defenseman? Clevin?
Yeah.
That to me feels a little scary. It might work out fantastically, which would be awesome. He is a very fast-moving, puck-controlling defenseman. He does bring a lot of points from the back end, and they need that. They haven't been able to score a lot. But is it worth the potential defensive risk? Would it give Clevin the ability to play a bit more defensively? Do you want him to play a bit more defensively? There's a lot of questions, and if the price is right, like if it's $1 million or less, that's a pretty good risk, I think. Like it's you're not paying a bunch to see where it goes. If it's anything more than that, I'm a little nervous because he's gonna, be expecting a bit more of a role, or at least the team is going to be expecting that. And will he just become the new Travis Hamonic?
Hmm.
Yeah. And as of right now, I'm more than happy to see Matt and Paolo stay on that third pair. He has been phenomenal with Ottawa. Um, I don't see a need for Klingberg. It's only going to be $1 million. I'd rather see that $1 million go towards it just be a little part of acquiring Hoglander or acquiring somebody like Hoglander just to add
Hmm.
scoring up front. So I don't see a need for it. It makes sense that they would be linked to him because they do want some more offense coming from the back end. I just don't see it working out. And on
Hmm.
like we see these guys come back after over a year of being injured. They're always just a shell of what they were. So
Hmm.
yeah, if they do it, great. There's not much risk to it. There's nothing wrong that's going to happen. They're not going to give him a full no move clause,
No.
so they can waive him worst case scenario.
Which is nice.
Be nice if Hamonic didn't have a full no move clause, but
That was a
yeah,
different time, different regime.
Yeah.
different regime. Thank goodness. But yeah, so I don't know. I don't think it'll happen. I expect that he'll go to Edmonton and probably tear it up and um be unreal. So
Yeah, it feels like a good fit for him,
it
honestly.
really does. Yeah. All right. So we're gonna finish this out with a game of Would You Rather. And so I have a list of five Ottawa Senators players and three comparables, sort of comparables. And I just want to know which player you would rather have. So you can give me a long explanation. You can just give me the name, um, whatever floats your boat. So we'll start with Tim Stutzle. Um, who would you rather have right now? And when I ask this, I mean considering the contract that they're on and for the rest of their career. So, assuming that you're going to keep these players for the rest of their career, and with their contract in mind as well. So, Tim Stutzle or Connor Bedard? Which one are you taking?
Bedard.
You're going to take Bedard, Matthew?
Oh, I'm going Stutzla on this because I see him as a more of established player right now. You know what you're getting. Connor Bedard, I mean, I know he's probably going to end up being a ridiculous, guy in the future, but I'm going for what he is now, and Stutzla's my guy for. I, I think even I mean, the contract of Bedard's under is a great one now, but it's going to end up being
Well, yeah.
big. But yeah, so I think Stutzle just has a bit more established now, and I think he still obviously has more to come too.
Okay. You're probably going to be more than welcome back on the podcast after that answer.
I'm
Okay,
safe.
the other
I can say
first.
whatever I want.
Yeah, this is your
Yeah, like
spot.
that.
Yeah. Um, the other first overall pick as of late, Macklin Celebrini. He has been unreal so far in his rookie season. He's more of a two-way player than Bedard or Stutzel. Is that enough to sway the vote for you? Either of you?
No, I would take Stutzla over Celebrini. I
Okay.
think Celebrini's going to be fantastic. But I think Stutzla probably has a higher upside right now. I remember conversations about how that draft class wasn't going to be the biggest, best draft class ever, and people had to temper their expectations.
Mhm.
Now, Celebrini's been doing fantastic in San Jose. Like he looks like a first overall pick, which is great. It kind of harkens back to Lafreniere and how he took some time to get into a spot where it's like, yeah, you are doing what we at least kind of hoped you would. Um, but Stutzle just, I think, is that more two-way presence, right? He's got that two-way game a little bit, but to me, it's more offensive potential, and I'm comfortable with Timmy staying.
Okay, Matthew, Stutzel or Celebrini?
I'm sticking with Stutzla on this one too because again, it's the same established thing. I think he's got more, like Dayton said, more offensive upside. I think Celebrini is going to cap out at something. He's not going to be a 100-point guy. I've said this with Celebrini too. I think he's going to end up being that really solid guy. He'll put up 70, 80 points, and be a good two-way player, but I don't think he's a high-end 100-point plus forward, while Stutzle has already gotten close to 100. Has he hit 100
No,
points?
he hit 90.
It's
Yeah.
close.
Yeah.
I think he's got a 100-point season in him.
Okay.
So I probably maybe even multiple. So, and I don't see that from Celebrini, although I could be proven wrong. He's got a heck of a shot. He could also, and really good playmaker too. So he may end up being that too. I just don't see him being a perennial type 100-point player.
Fair enough. So, Matthew, you mentioned a couple times about the how Tim Stützle's already established. So I've got two more names here, and they are both established players. Lucas Raymond. So this is an interesting one. Third and fourth overall in 2020. Raymond has more points than Stützle this season. He is a winger, so some people will value the center more. But what are your thoughts on that? Lucas Raymond or Tim Stützle?
I'm going with Lucas Raymond for that one. I just think that guy's just amazing. He's so dynamic. And watching him last season, I was of course following the Red Wings a bit more closely because I was hosting Grindline last season. But he's just every time I watch that guy, especially towards the end of the season when he kind of took the team on his back with Dylan Larkin out. He showed a bit more of that leadership that I didn't really think he had. Where he can put a team on his back and just be the offensive catalyst, and he was. And this season he's showing it too. So I just think Raymond's going to end up being he's such more. I mean, Stützle's an exciting player too, but I'd say Raymond. Between the two, I'd take Raymond. I mean, again, two different positions, but I just absolutely love watching Raymond play, and I think he's just going to end up he's just going to keep getting better throughout his career too.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of both players.
One
Raymond is very
both.
good. Yes, I
Both
would
on
love
the
to have
same
both.
team. Good to
Dayton, are you gonna take Raymond or Stützle?
I'm gonna take Stutzle. I like that he plays center. I like his speed. I like that he, has that potential to hit 100 points. I don't think Raymond's hit that yet either. And he looks really good this year. But yeah, no, I think Stutzle, in my mind, is the better overall player.
Yeah, I would take Stützle as well. I mean, and that's because I like the speed of Stützle over Raymond, but Raymond has the physicality over Stützle. So it's more of a preference on what you want there. I think they're both going to be very dominant players throughout the next 15 years in this league. I don't know if this next one, it might be close, but it might not be. So I don't know. This might be a bad one. Tim Stützle or Nick Suzuki?
Stutzle.
that's an easy one.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Suzuki's a good player.
Yeah.
Suzuki's a fantastic player.
Again, Stützle has more offensive upside.
Yeah. But Suzuki does have a much better two-way game than Stutzle,
That is true. Yeah.
yeah. All right, moving on to Josh Norris. Dayton, you and I already talked about this. Want to know if your thoughts have changed at all? Josh Norris or Dylan Cozens?
Ooh, I can't remember what I said before. Um, I think I said Cozens before, and I think I'm going to stick with that. Um, Josh Norris is a very good player. He's got a really good shot, and he's a pretty solid two-way force as well. I think Cozens just like he could be on another level, and he's a little bit younger. Taking him for the rest of his career, I think is going to pay massive dividends. The only problem is he's stuck in Buffalo, where good players go to die,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, that's just the case of how it's built right now. I think you get him out of that and put him with some really fun guys like Stutzle and Tkachuk and Batherson. He's gonna light it up, and he's got that size and he's got that snarl, and yeah, I think he could be incredibly dangerous on a different team.
That's fair. And I think Dylan Cozens is going to end up being a very, very similar player to Norris and have a very similar career. I think he definitely could be better, but he's not yet. So it's really like, do you take Josh Norris, who's the sure thing, or do you take the risk of him being not quite as good or a bit better? Like, I don't know. What are your thoughts, Matthew?
I'm going with Cozens. The biggest thing for me is that Norris still has that injury thing. You don't know for the rest of his career. Is he going to avoid the injuries now? Is it done? I'm not so sure. Cousins hasn't had that problem.
Yeah.
I think he's got a lot more potential, of course, in his game too. He hasn't really popped off yet. I mean, he had what one season where he did have the 30 goals. He
Yeah.
hasn't gotten that since.
Yeah.
But again, on the team he is, maybe that's the problem. I think on another team he definitely has a lot more, and he doesn't have that injury kind of history that could pop up and then end his career. So
Yeah,
that's
that's a big aspect of it too. Um, and so this one is more so comparing for the rest of their careers. Would you rather have Josh Norris right now or John Tavares?
Norris.
Norris.
You gonna take Norris over Tavares
Yeah,
right now?
Tavares has only I think a few more seasons left on his
Yeah.
shelf life. I mean, he seems to have kind of
Yeah.
kind of beaten it this season, but I think it's because the captaincy's not weighing on him anymore.
Yeah, I mean he's on pace for like 40 goals or so. Um 80 points. So I mean still an unreal player. But he is 30 what, 34, 33, somewhere in there.
Norris is still
33.
under 30, right?
Yeah, he's only 25.
Yeah, see a
Yeah.
ton more left.
Yeah.
Forgetting
So
that Tavares is my age. It's like, oh, he's so old. He's been there forever. I'm like, oh yeah, that's my age. Oh my goodness.
this man's almost a senior citizen in hockey.
I do have grays, so I don't know.
Yes. Well, I would take Grays over what I got. Don't complain about the Grays until they're gone.
Fair.
All right. No, this is one that you know quite well, Matthew. Josh Norris or Bo Horvat?
Bo Horvat.
You gonna take
I
Horvat?
I of course I've watched him most of his career. I he is an off the charts great two-way player. I mean, I think he's probably one of the best face-off men in the league right now still. I still think he's a 30 goal scorer. I don't know if he's on pace for 30 this season, but
I
I
think he's on pace for like 25 when I was looking.
yeah, he's a little below, but last season he hit 30. Previous season, I believe he hit 30 as well. But his two-way game has really developed since the beginning of his career. I mean, granted, that's what he was supposed to be. He was supposed to be a
Yeah.
great third line guy. He's turned into a Selke level, I think, at times. I don't know if he's done that for a full season yet, but you know, I think he could potentially win a Selke in his career because just he does everything. He's on the power play, penalty kill. I mean, Josh Norris does that too, but I think Horvat's got a bit more of that well-rounded game that I would go for Horvat. No bias. I guess there is bias because I've watched him. He's not a Canuck
Yeah.
anymore, but
Yeah. I think Norris is also a very good two-way guy, but I think Horvat is better defensively. And I would also give the edge to Horvat just because he's been more consistent. Obviously he's 5 years older than Norris is. So over the next 5 years, Norris could end up having a very similar career to Bo Horvat. Um, but yeah, Horvat's just done it and he's not that old. He's only 20, 29, 30.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, very similar players though.
yeah,
Dayton, who you taking for the rest of their career?
Yeah. It's close between them because Norris has the age advantage, but Horvat has, the I think he's more an all-around player. He's a bit more, yeah, effective everywhere. So I think I'd take Horvat. I think that might push the Senators into a bit more of a playoff position if they had a Horvat instead of a Norris. But in 5 years, that could be the opposite. So
it's true. Yeah.
Yeah, true. All right, moving on to Brady Tkachuk. I think this one's pretty easy one. Brady or Matthew?
Brady,
What?
yeah.
You really think so?
I'm not saying that he's better right now.
Yeah.
I think Matthew Tkachuk is like he he sucks. I do not like him as a player. He's a very
He
skilled player.
sucks.
He's great, but I don't know if I could cheer for the Senators if he was on my team. I think
Okay.
Brady is more likable. Um, I think he's younger, and I think he could surpass his brother in the future.
I just think a big part of it is the team that they have developed on.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
even when Matthew was in Calgary, they were a playoff team for most of his the start of his career. So we haven't even seen playoff Brady yet.
Yeah.
So I think that's yeah.
So it might be a bit of a hot take, but I'd rather have Brady than Matthew because I'd get Brady for longer. And they
Yeah.
do play similar styles. Like I know other people hate Brady. That's okay.
Yeah.
I'm aware of the hypocrisy. Uh, but I think, like I said, I think Brady could get better than his brother. A lot of younger brothers often surpass their older brothers, and you see that across the NHL. I think that I've seen bits of what Matthew has been able to do at his age a little earlier in Brady. So
Okay.
we'll hopefully see that develop as the Senators get better. But yeah, at this moment, I'm still taking Brady.
Hey, Matthew, how strongly do you disagree?
It's very tough. I
Yeah.
love both players. I think they play again similar styles. I Matthew's been, of course, a lot more points. I so far he's hit, of course, has a cup already too, and has shown that he can perform in the playoffs. Obviously, Brady hasn't been able to get there yet. So I mean, he hasn't been able to show what he can do, but at this point, it's funny. We went through two players I wish were on the Canucks right now. Um,
Yeah.
I wish Horvat was still here, and of course, everyone knows the Canucks could have drafted Matthew
Yeah.
way back instead of Ole Levy, but
Ole
that's a
Levy.
whole new can of worms that's been opened many times already. But
Fun
yeah,
little fact when we were watching the World Juniors when Ule Levy was, starring there. Um, my dad would laugh every time they said his name because all he heard was little old lady.
Little
Little old
old
lady.
lady.
Yeah. Hmm. Just a
That's
fun
good.
side note. Sorry to interrupt.
no, it's yeah, and of course we all know what happened to Levy. He's not. I don't even know where he is. I think he's in Europe. He's playing somewhere.
I think
Um,
he's with the Panthers, isn't he?
no, that was a while ago now too. He's somewhere in Europe playing
Finland,
for a
Tapara,
Finnish team.
Yeah, that was like
Tapara.
4 years ago.
Yeah,
Oops.
it's been a while. And so I mean, it's really tough because I really like how Matthew plays. I hate him as a player too. I mean, I hate him because he just it's because any team he's been on, I mean, going against, of course, Flames for so many years. It's he really tested me. And of course, every time I'm like, the Canucks could have had this guy. Yes, I know this. Um, but you know how you love this guy on your team though.
Yeah.
Um, very small way, I go with Matthew. I
Yeah.
think he's got so much. Not saying Brady doesn't have this too. I mean, I'd love both of them on the team too. This is another one where you'd want both of them. But I go with Matthew just very, very slightly.
Okay. Brandon Hagel. I think this is a lot closer than when you first hear the name Brandon Hagel.
Uh, oh, who are we going over for? Brady?
Brady Tkachuk, yes.
Okay. I just go with Brady for this one.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I
Brady all the
think
way.
I mean Hagel's an okay. Yeah, I'm going with Brady for that one.
Okay. I definitely go Brady as well, but I mean Hagel's
He's really
better
established himself
offensively.
lately.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like 75 points last year. He's on pace for like 90 this year.
And I always
Um,
forget that he actually has those types of points. I
yeah,
always
like
still think him as like a third line guy, but
yeah, and he's still got he's got almost the same level of physicality and the gritty play as the Kachucks and whatnot. Like I think it's a lot closer, and people don't realize that Brandon Hagel is an unreal player.
He is underrated for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Brady Tkachuk or William Nylander. These are two very different styles, but I think very similar in value.
Oh, Yeah, totally different styles for sure.
Yeah.
I still think I'd go Brady. Um, he's just that captain material.
Hmm.
Yeah.
He's somebody who can lead a team. And Willie, for all of his, positive attributes and skills, does not strike me as a captain.
Yeah.
No, no, for sure not. And what I don't like, what's always struck me with him is how I don't like players that hold out and
Mm.
and he sat for almost a whole, well, half a season.
Brady
I
sat out for like
contract
a week.
a
Yeah.
week, yeah. But I mean, he didn't drag it out like for
Yeah.
insanely long, where it's like we don't have you for almost the whole season. Like that's
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and they
I
might as
don't
well have not had Nylander for that season
that
because he
whole
was not
season.
himself when he came
Yeah.
back in October or
I mean,
December
that's just
or
always rubbed me
November.
the wrong way with him. I
Yeah.
mean, so just that's kind of clouding my opinion.
Yeah.
He is a heck of a player, though. I
So
mean,
good.
his I mean, there. I keep going back. Always these guys that the Canucks could have drafted. He was another one.
Yeah. Well,
Canucks
and
would
I
be a
think
powerhouse. All the guys they could have drafted. Although every
yeah.
team has that.
I think with that conversation, the biggest deal breaker for me is the contract. I'll take Brady Tkachuk at 8 million over
Yeah.
Nylander at 11 and a half any day of the week. All right. So I got two defensemen here, Chabot and Sanderson. We're gonna run through them just pretty quick, just for the sake of time. So very interesting one here. Chabot or Chychrun?
Chabot. Do you need me to explain? Um, yeah, I do think they have similar styles. I didn't like it when Chychrun was here.
Yeah.
Like he had that offensive side, but there was some significant defensive concerns. And like he's
Yeah.
doing fine in Washington now, but those concerns have never been present with Chabot. Even though there's been other, issues, you know, there's been some defensive concerns, there's been some offensive concerns. Nothing like what I saw with Chychrun last year, and I wasn't that sad to see him go, honestly.
Okay. I'll be honest, I quite miss him. I love Chychrun and the vibes that he had. Matthew, Chabot or Chychrun?
I like Chabot. I've liked him since he came into the league. I mean, I thought he was going to be another Eric Carlson, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Well, he
Um,
looked like it in the World Juniors.
and then his first or second season. He had like 70 plus points.
I think his second season he had like I think it was 58, but he was on pace for like over
He's on
70.
pace for a lot. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
remember looking at that season, like, oh, he's on pace for like 70-ish points.
Yeah,
Uh,
55 in 70 games.
yeah. So I mean, maybe slowed down.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's got so much. I mean, the offensive potential is definitely obviously he's an older player now. But yeah, I agree with Dayton. I didn't like Chychrun in Ottawa.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. Was it just the team he was on? Because in Arizona he was really good, and in Washington he's really good. So what is it?
I think
He doesn't
he needs
fit.
to be the guy, and he would never be that in Ottawa.
Mhm.
I think that's his thing. Thomas Chabot or Morgan Riley?
Ooh, Shabbat all the way.
I think so too. Especially like these last 2 years. Riley
Yeah.
hasn't been
Oh,
good.
Riley's fallen off a cliff.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
listening to the Steve Dangle podcast, which I do, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to admit that on a Senators podcast, but they talk about other things. It's fine.
Yeah.
They were talking about how much Riley has fallen and how much it's costing the Leafs right now.
Yeah.
So like I wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole right at this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I like Chabot over Riley too. I think um I mean he's had great seasons. But yeah, he has really fallen off and
Yeah.
he should be their number one defenseman. He hasn't really played like that lately.
Yeah. I think OEL is better than him this season, which is insane.
Yeah, there's another guy wishing on the Canucks right now playing like that.
Yeah.
Under the
And not
contract
at
he has right now.
and not at like 8.5 million or whatever he was.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Last one, Jake Sanderson. These are three very interesting ones, and they're all very close, I think. So Jake Sanderson or Brock Faber?
Oh, how does that?
Very
Ooh,
similar contracts. Um, I think Sanderson has the better offensive upside. I might give Faber the edge defensively, but even then, it's really close. What do you
yeah.
guys think?
That's a tough one.
It is a tough. I love Brock Faber. I think I've liked him for a long time too. So that's probably coloring it. So
Yeah.
I'll go Faber, but very close.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll go Faber as well. I'm not happy about it, but I will.
Yeah. I mean, Faber led the league in ice time last year.
Yeah.
It's like that's pretty telling. He hasn't been as good this year. But I mean the Wild are just a wagon and he's a big part of that. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
Jake Sanderson or Luke Hughes?
Man, you're really giving us tough ones with these ones.
I know, these were good ones. There's a lot of really good young defensemen.
Yeah. I want to go Sanderson on that one because of his two-way game. Luke Hughes is
Yeah.
a bit more offensive. He might develop that defensive game just like Quinn Hughes has. But Sanderson has that right now. So I'm gonna go with Sanderson.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'd side with Matthew here. It's Sanderson.
I
Luke
f
Hughes is really interesting. He could become another Quinn Hughes, but that's quite a ways away. Whereas I think Sanderson's a lot closer to being like a top defenseman in the league and will be for longer.
I think the gap between Sanderson and Hughes is a lot bigger than people think because Luke Hughes' last name is Hughes. I think that
Yeah.
does a lot of favors for him. He's a fantastic defenseman, but we're having this conversation saying um, that Luke Hughes could turn into a Quinn Hughes. We're not having that conversation with anybody else on this list. It's only because of his last name.
It's true.
Like I'm not calling him a nepo baby or anything like that or whatever. He's a fantastic defenseman, but feel like people add a lot of value because of his last name, which is fair. Look at his brothers; they're two of the best players in the league. It's probably genetic. So,
Must be tough for him though. I mean to
oh,
look at that.
100%.
Gee, like to see this two guys, his brothers are already superstars
Yeah,
established, and he's like, I have to live up to that. He's
there's
got
only like
talent. We'll see.
10 players in the world that are as good as his brothers.
Yeah.
Like,
Can he?
yeah,
I mean, he's got the genetics on
yeah,
his side, but can he match that? That's pretty tough.
yeah.
He was putting up
Uh,
similar points to Quinn in the US national team.
Mm.
yes, he was.
So I think he's a lot closer to that than like he's definitely not there, and I think it'll take him longer to hit that than Quinn.
Yeah,
At least kind of on the progress that he's going, because he's not the guy in New Jersey. They're not developing around him. He's developing while they're rolling with it with
Mm.
his
yeah.
older brother. So
Well, now they have Hamilton as their offensive guy. That's why his
Yeah.
point totals looked so good last year was all the power play one time, and now Hamilton's
Yeah.
back on the first power play.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, Quinn was right there. He was put on the first power play.
Yeah,
His first, I think his first game.
yeah.
probably. Speaking of offensive defensemen, last one on this list, Jake Sanderson or Lane Hutson? Who you taking
Oh.
for the next 15 to 18 years?
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go Lane Hutson.
You might
I
not be
know,
welcome back.
I know. I think Lane Hutson is doing things that are kind of unheard of. Like he is defying everybody every game. And it's just because he's little. But
Yeah.
he's doing things that we haven't really seen from small defensemen. And you can go back into podcasts with the prospect corner. I picked Hudson to be my rookie of the year.
Hmm.
hmm
Um, because he's always been underrated. Like he fell to the second round, I think.
He
Yeah.
almost fell into the third
Almost
round.
to
He
the
was
third.
That's right. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
way
64th
too
overall
low.
or something like that.
Yeah.
And like he keeps winning. Kind of like a Meriläinen, right? He wins at every level.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're gonna get a Sanderson with Hudson. I think you're gonna get a Makar. And if I'm getting between a Sanderson and a Makar, I'm taking Makar every day.
Yeah. You know
So
what
at this,
really upsets me about Lane Hudson though? Other than like that he leads the league in head fakes per 60. You know what really upsets me about him?
Hmm.
That's what Eric Branstrom was supposed to be.
Yeah,
And I'm just like I'm jealous of it. And like yeah, I don't know. I would never admit that to a Habs fan's face, But yeah, I envy them.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I so I'm going with Lane Hudson. That's probably not a surprise, nor was watched Prospect Corner.
yeah.
Um, I've loved him since his. I of course wrote his prospect profile, too, and I said he was going to drop into the whatever. He wasn't going to draft in the first round, even though he was a first round talent. Um,
You could probably retire off the clicks on that article.
that draft profile did pretty well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, he's amazing. I don't want to say I'm not saying he's going to be a Makar or a Quinn Hughes because I think those two guys are just they're generational guys. I
Hmm.
it's hard to say. I mean, if he does, that's even more amazing
Yeah.
because Makar and Hughes were drafted high in the first round. They were expected to be these
Yeah.
types of players. Hudson, no way. If he becomes those at that level, I mean, we'll see if he can do it more than one season. This season, obviously, he's doing it, but can he do it over 4 or 5 seasons, six, whatever? Makar and Hughes have already done that. They've established themselves as those types of defensemen. He still has that to go, but I love that he's actually doing what I thought he would do. So.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go Jake Sanderson because this is not a Senators podcast, and somebody had
This
to.
is a love in of
You made the
Klingberg.
comparison.
I did. I did. Yeah. No, those were that was really interesting. I really like doing stuff like that and just seeing like where do we think the value of these top players are, and it's pretty clear that Ottawa. I mean, the three of us value Ottawa's top players quite a bit. So that'll wrap things up for today. This was a bit of an extra long episode, but yeah, so thanks everybody for tuning in. Make sure to check out all of the content on thehockeywriters.com for the Senators. Make sure to check out Matthew's stuff for the Canucks as well, with all of the chaos going on there. He's doing a great job covering it, as does the rest of the Canucks team. And make sure to check out the Substack as well. So thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next week.